Welcome to the Newark Regional Business Partnerships Engage in Exchange podcast. Join us for business insights and meaningful conversations with NRBP's member organizations. Thank you to our podcast host sponsor, the Martin Tuchman School of Management at NJIT. Additional support for NRBP's Engage in Exchange podcast is provided by PSEG, New Jersey Urban News, Main Street Advisory, LLC. Today's guest is Phillip Woolfolk of Main Street Advisory, LLC. So, Phil, tell us about yourself.
All right. So, Philanda, let's see. Main Street Advisory, LLC is a company I started back in 2015 after leaving my banking career, where I spent, I guess, about roughly 25 years or so. And I had an opportunity to spend about 5 years home with my two daughters, who you've met, and doing a bunch of golfing and camping and swimming and traveling and just having a good time. So when it got to be time to get back to work, I started Main Street Advisory to basically work with companies to help them improve their profitability. And that company has kind of evolved into an alternative lending organization now, where I work with companies still to improve profitability, but also to help them with funding.
Did you start your professional career in lending?
No, I started my professional career back in 1979 as a teller. So I was a teller for a couple of years, then a foreign teller, then worked my way into sales management. And at the time, I worked for a relatively small bank by today's standards, had about 85 branches, and I became a sales manager and worked there until probably about 1986, and then went on to work for another company managing a retail branch where I was credit trained, and that's the time I got involved in commercial lending, small business lending, SBA lending, and then subsequent to that, after being home for probably, I spent about 7 years growing my real estate investment company.
Okay.
And that was from probably 1987 till 1983. In 1983, I got involved in residential mortgage lending, ultimately managed sales and operations for residential mortgage lending, and then later became the vice president and fair lending manager for fair lending compliance for the 7-state market area for the bank that I worked for. So lending came probably, I would say, about 8 years into my banking career.
And so your typical client looks like what? Can you describe?
Yes. My typical client, if I were to profile them based on clients I'm working with right now, would be either a real estate investor that's doing purchase rehab type projects, might be a developer that's looking for either a line of credit or has a line of credit that they need to pay off, and it could be a developer that's doing ground up construction. And I also do some coaching around helping companies in terms of how they improve profitability, and in addition to that, working with companies to help them build established business credit. And also there are some companies out there that really need help on pivoting from their current one revenue stream type operation. And so I'm a strong proponent of multiple streams. And so, because I know from experience that one stream can be attacked. We learned that during the pandemic. You have folks who had one stream of income. The pandemic happened, and then all of a sudden their income is under attack, and they don't have the revenue that they need to survive or exist.
Can you describe more of the challenges that clients have that typically come to you?
Well, clients come to me for a variety of reasons. On the funding side, I have people for lines of credit, for straight mortgages. I have people who need equipment financing to be able to purchase the equipment they need for their business. Sometimes vehicles they need for their business. And then on the consulting coaching side, in terms of advising folks, it's a variety of things. So I have a client right now who has a good, strong business, but it's a single revenue business, and they're very much interested in adding another stream of revenue. And so I'm working with them basically to identify what their strengths are and what those revenue streams potentially could be in terms of them pivoting and adding another division, for lack of a better word, for their business, in order for them to get out of this situation of having this one stream of income. And so that's probably one of the bigger challenges.
How do you typically prospect for your clients?
A variety of ways. I attend a number of events, and I'm always working the room and meeting different people that way. From a social media standpoint, I'm on a few different social medias, but I think LinkedIn is where I spend most of my time. And so I do meet companies and organizations, and I schedule introductory sessions, kind of get acquainted sessions with people. So as I'm engaging with people on social media or from networking events, I just schedule 15 minutes, 30 minutes to get acquainted. Sometimes there's a good fit and there's business out of it. Sometimes it may not be a good fit for me from a business standpoint, for me personally, but I'm also able to connect people to resources and other folks they may need to know.
Now, you're also a published author.
Yes.
So how is your book helping your Main Street advisory business grow? Is there some leveraging of that you're getting from
absolutely
from the publishing?
As a matter of fact, the one of the purposes of getting
what's the
involved,
title of your book?
Oh, the title is Triumph in the Trenches: Navigating Success for Black Professionals, and volume 2 of that book, we've decided it's going to be a trilogy.
Okay.
So volume 2 just came out, and volume 3 to follow. And then I have a solo project that I'm working on right now with the same publisher. But to answer your question in terms of how that's being leveraged, is that as I promote the book, I also have an opportunity to promote the various business operations that I'm involved in, and that typically yields some results. And the purpose of the book initially was to serve as a big business card, to basically be able to utilize it as a tool to be able to promote other services that I offer, meet people, and also grow the speaking engagement business, which is another operation.
And what would you say for your Main Street advisory business? What are some of the challenges you, as a business owner, are experiencing, either growing that, scaling that, diversifying it? What are some challenges you personally are experiencing in your business?
One of the big challenges for anyone that's involved in the lending space, of course, is that you have people who are just not ready for the loan. And sometimes you have folks who have not understood the importance or significance of credit, and so they haven't managed that process as well as they can. And so sometimes you're working with folks who are a little behind the 8 ball, and they have to kind of catch up in order to be able to get to a point where they're fundable. So that's probably one of the bigger challenges. You sit down, you talk to somebody, and they say their credit score is 750, and then you run it up the flagpole and find out it's 550, and so that's a challenge.
What's your approach when you encounter someone like that? Do you say, "Oh well, this is what I have, and so I have to work with that person," or do you give them advice and kind of turn them away and say, "Come back to me when you're ready"? How do you typically approach that situation?
Well, one of the ways I work with people like that is I typically have them inform me what their actual blemishes are. Sometimes there are things there that, with some explanation, might give them a way out. One of workshops I did recently was on access to capital and the 5 C's of credit, right? One of the big C's for me is character. And so I know based on my lending history and my lending background is that is a prime characteristic. And so as you have people who demonstrate they're a good risk, sometimes their character can overcome some of the other challenges that they may have. Because the lender basically wants to know, am I going to get my money back, right? I share the story that, in my lending history, I recall having a client who had filed bankruptcy. And typically, you talk to somebody who's filed bankruptcy, even though it may be fully discharged, they may not have reestablished credit to the point where the lender wants to lend them money. This particular gentleman, when I looked at his financials, he was carrying an accounts payable for the discharge bankruptcy. And so I asked him why he was doing that. And what he said was that he borrowed money. He filed bankruptcy because he needed some breathing room. But from an integrity standpoint, he still owed the money. And doing a little more research, he was carrying a $50,000 accounts payable balance. Doing a little research, I found out that when the bankruptcy was discharged, it was closer to $150,000. So he had actually paid down roughly $100,000 on a debt that he didn't have to pay. Right? To me, that's a person that's honoring their handshake. Right? And make a long story short, he ultimately got financing from us, even though all things being equal, it was a loan that you would typically deny.
Okay.
Right. So it depends on the circumstance, and people have to have a certain degree of patience and perseverance, because for some folks it may have taken them 10 years to get their credit to the abysmal state that it's in. So you're not going to clean it up in 2 months.
Right.
But you can provide them with the steps of what they need to do, and those folks that are willing to follow those steps and they're coachable in that way, then you can typically help them down the road.
That's great. Now, you're a recent member of NRBP. So talk to us about what prompted you to join us.
Well, what prompted me to join is that basically, my business, I do a couple of different things. I'm interested in doing more business across the state, and I like smaller organizations that allow you to get to know people sometimes a little more intimately. And so that was one of the reasons. I also happen to be a fan of the president and CEO of the organization.
Right, we're members of the Mutual Admiration Club.
Right. So we have a history. We go back to the being fellow board members and then fellow staff members, and so that's one of the reasons I'm here. And I'm also, one of my goals this year is to increase my philanthropy, and I have an initiative that's tied to that, where there will be a philanthropy button on my websites for both organizations, and then I'm identifying specific organizations that I want to support. And so as I'm out and about talking to clients and prospects and strategic partners and all those things, I'll be asking those folks to join with me in support of some of those organizations that I think that are doing important work for our community.
Well, that is exciting. So we want to thank you for joining us today. So again, it's Phillip Woolfolk. He's the founder of Main Street Advisory, LLC. If you want to learn more about the Newark Regional Business Partnership, we invite you to visit our website at newarkrbp.org. And as always, we like to leave you with a quote, an inspirational quote. And so I'm going to turn to my notes. And Steve Jobs has said, "Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower." So if you're innovative, you're probably a leader. If you're not, then you're probably following the pack. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next side. Thank you for listening to NRBP's Engage in Exchange podcast. Tune in next time for more NRBP member organization insights. For more information about our organization, visit www.newarkrbp.org. Thank you again to our podcast host sponsor, the Martin Tuchman School of Management at NJIT. Additional support for NRBP's Engage in Exchange podcast is provided by PSEG, New Jersey Urban News, Main Street Advisory, LLC.